Good afternoon and welcome to this panel session. And on the panel you can see me, Liam Hogg, Sian Langford, Emma Brookes, Lisa Farrell and Dr. Darar. Apiri. Good enough? Yeah. We're here to answer any questions that you have, limited to what the NHS is going to look like in 2030. So, over to you guys.
Hello, I'm Stephen Hall, Head of Facilities at Milton Keynes Hospital. Very much our business when it comes to cleaning, catering and portering. Very much a people business, and it's operated by people and it serves patients and staff. So how do you think that's going to change in the next 5 years? And we have heard quite a bit about automation today, but do you think I'll still be here in 5 years' time with a large people service?
I can start off and then everyone else can jump in. From my perspective, we always need people. They are the key to what we do. Automation is great and it supports what our people do. We can't take that away from them. What it's doing is enhancing the role that they play, the really important role that our healthcare cleaning professionals play in ensuring a clean and safe environment.
Yeah, I'd certainly second that from a robotics perspective. I did a presentation earlier, some of you might have attended, and I showed a video, a very sleek video of the Figure 1 robots. Very professional, very impressive. However, I've seen the outtakes from that video as well. So there's absolutely still kinks in the system that need ironing out. So 5 years as a horizon, no, I don't think you'll be out of a job. And in fact, what I would say, I had a conversation with a college up in Scotland a couple of years back now, and they train up a lot of care professionals. What we did say was that the care professionals are like, are we training up the next generation of care professionals who are going to need to be able to use robotics in people's homes to support them with their jobs? Or are we training up the next generation of roboticists who need some care skills? So I think my answer would be in 5 years' time, you're thinking about how can you train your team to be not necessarily do what they're doing now, but to be supported by robots and figure out the next stage of how that can be automated to support them in their jobs in an ageing population.
I think that's a really valid point, and actually I think in the next 5 years, particularly in a facilities management role, that's going to be our most critical point, is supporting, the majority of us will have teams that are ageing and that are often resistant to change. I think I've heard that comment in many of the presentations today, and actually our role in the next 5 years is going to be around supporting those staff to not fear that change and to understand that it isn't a replacement for them, and we're not shipping everybody out to pasture and replacing them all with robots, but that can be something that potentially extends their role and supports them to be able to complete their role for longer and in more effective ways, rather than something that they need to fear and therefore step back from.
So my lens is, I speak primarily from the procurement lens, and I can tell you that when I speak to procurement professionals, usually procurement is usually under-resourced element in institutions already. So they still need more people. So in the next 5 years, I don't think anyone is going anywhere. If anything, all these technologies will only come in to further assist and make things run a lot faster and more productive and be more productive. But, well, there's still a lot more holes to be filled. So definitely there are roles.
Apologies for being late. I'm Judith Stewart. I'm from Health Innovation West Midlands. I'm assuming this was a question about what happens in 5 years' time.
Are we all going to be replaced by robots?
Are we all going to be replaced by... Well, I would love to, in some respects, because then I could be on the beach reading my book that I have mentioned many times this afternoon. I don't think we are going to be all replaced by robots. I think, as clever as robots are, they can't do personal care. Simple as that. And that personal care comes from every element within a hospital, not just the clinical staff. And I think it's really important that from a soft facilities management perspective, we're encouraging staff to understand that their roles are as important And for me, what we can be doing with kind of robots is encouraging them to get rid of all the mundane and actually really concentrate on that personal element. That would be my key.
And for my two penneth, I let the other guys know in the other room that I wasn't really a waste manager. I'm a civil engineer, and I started life in a drawing office with drawing boards and drawing pens and draftsmen and tracers and all. And when they brought CAD in, everybody thought that's it. Everyone's going. And actually that's not what happened. What happened was people's jobs changed, and instead of drawing boards you saw a lot of CAD machines. But actually the skills to draw was still required, even that you were drawing on screens rather than on things. So I think it's going to change. But I think, and the other thing as well, I don't know if anyone's noticed, in the NHS, we're a little bit behind with things. So anything that can help us catch things up, I think is going to be really useful in the future. And I think that's a positive spin on things. And I'm one of these people that think the future could be a lot better than where we are at the moment. So I would think like that.
Joseph Pearson, United Linkage Teaching Hospitals. Just wonder whether we'll have any portering standards in the next 5 years that we can begin to align our teams working to.
Yeah, so within the next 5 years, I absolutely can't make a full promise because our publication systems can take a while. However, what I can tell you is they're in the final stages at the moment to come back to the working party to finalise and get into the publications programme. We are aiming to have these published and out before the end of the financial year. However, again, it depends on what else is on the grid and what else needs to get out there. So I can't confirm. I mean, I made the mistake when we did the 2021 cleaning standards that were meant to be 2017, then 2019, and then 2020. And I stood on this stage and many other stages year after year with updates. So I always think these programs will take about 18 months. And both the food standards and the cleaning standards both took 4 years from setting up the working party to getting out and published. So yes, the aim is you'll definitely have them, as far as I'm concerned, within the next 5 years, because then I'll be retired and someone else will have to pick it up.
And I think it's worthwhile making the point that this timescale, so it's going to be the same with the HTML 701, and we know that we're thinking it's probably 7 years before we'll get to have a real good view of that. But even when we were doing the last HTM, the world was growing up around us, and we were having to change the document while we were waiting for the approvals because the world was going around us. So it's a complicated thing to get through. And the other thing as well is, even though we bleat about it, and I certainly was bleating about when we were trying to put HTML 701 together, I wanted it to look a very different document. Basically, that's the document. If you end up in court, that's the document that whatever happens in court, the judgments are made on. So they have to be technically correct and accurate. So it is very complicated. It's not just words and telling, an SOP of how to do stuff. Next question.
Mine's a bit of a strange question, I suppose. Obviously today's been really insightful around robotics, AI. Where would you see innovation in 5 years' time, and what do you think it would look like?
Honestly, at the moment, I think we're going to have robots in our homes, in our leisure spaces, in our workplaces, possibly not for you guys, though, because the rate of change at the moment and the lack of funding and everything we know about the procurement pathways, the bureaucracy, robots are going to be everywhere, and you're going to get to the doorway of an NHS site. You walk inside and there's still paper on clipboards. There's still a mop bucket sitting unattended because we can't recruit the people to clean our hospitals, perhaps. That's the nightmare scenario. I would like to think we were making a lot of progress. There are pockets of robotics being deployed in the NHS at the moment. I'm sure people in this room have interacted with robots in the NHS. What we're missing is a strategy across the UK. We're working on it, But my real ask back to you guys is please start socialising this back within your teams, with your leaderships, because the journey I've been on, oh, that's a terrible hackneyed phrase, isn't it? But in Scotland is I've done a lot of work with the grassroots, the frontline workers, and we haven't been able to get a pilot project off the ground. What I've had to do is go literally right to the top. So I'm working under Neil Gray, the Cabinet Secretary for Health in Scotland, to build a business case for a national health Robotarium for Scotland. So I've had to go right to the top just to be mandated to come up with a business plan. So what I'd say is, can we start socialising this now? Can we start pushing upwards and saying, we are stretched, robotics could help, but there are robotics companies out there, homegrown robotics startups who will lose into the US. So we need to start changing things. There needs to be a big shift, and I think I've heard that back from everyone today, but we need our leaders to start taking notice too.
On the robots first, and then innovation afterwards.
Oh, innovation.
Innovation robots?
I've got some comments on innovation. Yeah.
Innovation then.
So I would like, in 5 years' time, that every element of the NHS has a dedicated innovation lead, has a dedicated innovation budget, which is for use of trying things on the expectation that 75% of it will not work. Because what we do is we tie ourselves in complete knots in the NHS about things having to prove themselves beyond all reasonable doubt. Now, I'm not wanting to diminish the risk, the clinical risk or the clinical safety elements of anything, but we do have to be a darn sight more pragmatic and practical about innovation. Currently, there is stupid amounts of money going into research. Research is great, but you need innovation to turn that research into action. So I would like to see dedicated innovation budgets that match at least the research budgets that cross all aspects of any healthcare unit and are able to then enable us to take some risks, try some stuff out, and actually get things moving forward.
I think that's one of the things that estates facilities teams need to maybe take a little bit more, take a bit of the bull by the horns, so to speak. As a trust, we've got an innovation team. I'm sure many of you will sit in trusts that have got a dedicated innovation team. And often we've found that those innovation teams are actually really keen to get involved in some of the estates and facilities aspects. So for example, place, last year we invited our innovation lead to join us as a place assessor. And actually the value that came out of that was the innovation lead came back to us the week after the place assessment with a whole list of their own ideas outside of the place criteria that they had never had access to before and were really keen to work with us on. But very often we leave it to clinical teams and we assume that we're not invited to the table when it comes to innovation, and actually some of it is maybe going out and knocking on the door and asking to be involved, and the worst they can say is no, but actually we might find that they're quite keen to say yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the innovation point is a really, really great one, because that's where, you know, the little sparks come from. So for me, it is about, I think, the plea, get out there, innovate, look at things, take some risks. Some of the work that we are doing around the potential for a new auditing system using forensic light sources that will give us assurance, but also cut down radically the time it takes to audit. We know things, you know, as I said, anyone who was in my presentation earlier, apologies, but if I spit in a glass and wipe it clean, you will all, every single person in this room will come up and say, yes, that's clean, check, but it's not clean. So how do we take that to the next level and support both our clinical IPC, our patients, everyone out there, to know that we genuinely have a clean and safe environment. And the technology is just becoming so great now. If we don't innovate now, we'll miss the bus, essentially.
Yeah, I would just like to add that there will also be, or there should be also be greater innovation around integration across trusts. We find that trusts are not sharing as much information as they should, and this ultimately will help to eliminate product obsolescence. Things that just stay on shelves and then go bad and then go to waste and things like that. So information sharing is an area where innovation is going to sort of change things. Also, it's also going to bring about conversations across suppliers, where we're going to be able to bring more suppliers to the table to have conversations, because currently we know that low-value items, for instance, we have recycling issues around low-value items, and then part of it is because suppliers refuse to work together. And so with more data and more automation, what we will be able to see in the end is more access to analyze data to help us plan better and ultimately break silos. We'll also be able to have national level innovations that will be able to trickle down to different trusts. So that's where we're going to have some form of innovation, or should be driving innovation across data management to break silos, so that trust can basically talk to themselves. We know what the next trust is doing, and as a result, we can pick up what they're doing and then improve on the services we provide.
Can I just come in on that? Because there is something around innovator passports that has been mooted. My concern is that, again, that will focus entirely on clinical innovation. And I think it's entirely up to all of you, anyone in facilities management, to make sure that it is an equal playing field. We're doing some work internally with some IPC colleagues, but also with the facilities management guys around air purification. It won't happen without facilities. It's going to include some research, it's going to include some funding for some specific activity. It's about getting on that train and being prepared to kind of be a little bit more bolshy. I know you probably feel you're fed up hitting your heads against the brick walls, but being that little bit more bolshy and going, actually, research is for us, innovation is for us, and we need to be involved in that, as you've quite rightly said.
And I would add to that a couple of things. So firstly, innovation isn't always shiny boxes.
Yeah.
Sometimes innovation is just a change in behaviours. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think we pass over a lot of those to look for shiny boxes, and we're missing opportunities. That's number one. Number two, robots are not necessarily going to look like R2-D2 or CP3O. Actually, the Internet of Things is changing things dramatically. So, for instance, whether rooms are in use or not, whether the lights are on, what the humidity's like. I mean, the sensors that are available out there now to control a building are absolutely bewildering and cost buttons. Yeah. It literally costs buttons. And I think, you know, if we're looking at an organisation that's short of money, that's where I'd be looking to bring in innovations in to make us more efficient in a very economic way going forwards. So, and so be brave about stuff. You know, I agree. You know, the great thing about estates and facilities, without us, there is no NHS, because there's nowhere to practice it, you know, and so we have a part to play. We operate in a very noisy room. Everyone does in the NHS. So we've just got to make sure a couple of things. A, we've got our information correct, our data's correct, and we know what we're talking about. B, we're talking in a language to the people that are important. So we're talking to the CFO in the way that he or she understands, and the same thing in terms of the COO or the estates director or whatever. If you're green and fluffy and you go to a CFO and be all green and fluffy, he's got so much pressure, he or she got so much pressure on dealing with what they've got to deal with, you'll get nowhere. Yeah. So we are starting to learn the language that we need to speak. You know, in waste management, we've got a waste training program for healthcare waste managers, the first we've ever had, and part of that program is learning how to get what you want from people. And I think we could get better at that.
There's been a lot of talk about innovation, and I think that's really important in terms of individual trusts, but it seems a waste of time if every trust is trying to innovate to the same thing. So with your example having to go to the top and then cascade down, will there be any plans to produce a standards package or a HTM that dictates certain services must have automated processes to replace manual as they currently are? Because to me, that's the best way to get trusts, and you've seen it with various HTM packages, the best way to have trusts adhere to a guidance because there is a dictation there.
So I actually work with a guy whose job it is to manage innovations coming into the NHS, Jack Stansel Lewis.
Oh.
.nhs.co. And he's set up a program where we're working with the Health Innovation Network up and down the country. And what that does, the idea is we take all the innovations that come to us, they go through a process to assess whether they're real or not real, whether they can be applied or not applied, whether they're, I think they've got some weird terminology. We're ready and they're ready, or we're not ready and they are, or they're not ready and we're... So they're put into these classes and actually working with the innovators. Somebody said it earlier on, that's a slight underestimate. You can bet your life that 80% of all your innovations will fail. That's the nature of it. So, and I think what Jack and the team are doing is trying to build the confidence in the innovation. Now, what I see is somebody will come to me and say, I've got this innovation, it's fantastic, and we're going to save the NHS. And then they start telling me about it, and I think, well, that's so 25 years ago. And you just let them down gently, and then the next thing they go to another trust, and then another, and another, and another. And what we're trying to do is not waste that energy and have this hidden network to allow us to bring innovations that have been vetted, is the wrong word, but they might have been through sort of medical or clinical assessments to see that they're real and actually do work. And that's something that we need to work on. Whether it ends up being in an HTM, seems to be a bit specific to me. I'm much more one of these people that the HTMs need to be flexible enough to last 7 years. So, you know, we just need to be careful about that. I don't know if anyone else wants to chip in.
If I may, what we know from NICE guidance is that you can stick it in a document and you can dictate that people should use it, and they don't. So whilst I appreciate the sentiment, I'm not sure mandation is the route to go necessarily. We have found that where we can get some decent evidence, so doing that, you know, does it actually do what it says it does? Does it actually do it more than once? Does it do it in a couple of different places? Because that's always helpful to know. Those are the sorts of things that we ask. I think there is something interesting, however, in having a national portfolio of innovations. The NHSE have kind of gone, you know what, we are content with these. Not endorsing them, not saying you have to buy them, but we are content. And I think through the 10-year plan and through innovator passports, which, so long as they are covering non-clinical innovations as well as clinical, will give us a route to that. Because what we all suffer from is pilotitis, right? We try it here, we try it there, we try it in the next place. I work with around 400 innovators a year, and I can tell you they are sick and tired of taking their innovation and going with evidence and somebody going, oh yeah, but that doesn't quite work for us because. So there is something about standardization which I think is behind your question as well, which I do appreciate and I think we need to get better at. There is something about not mandating and not endorsing, but saying this we know this we think works. It's up to you if you want to try it. And there's got to be, I think, a happy medium between that mandation piece and kind of here's your portfolio, guys. Knock yourselves out. Which ones do you want to have a play with?
And there's no substitute. You're still going to have to do some work with this. So in the other room, we had a guy who had a machine that gobbled up food waste, and it works. There's a number of processes out there that work. But actually what's happened is people have shiny box, go and buy a shiny box, we've solved the solution. And then what's happened is as they're putting stuff in the shiny box, it's like, wow, we've got 30% food waste. And then somebody goes, well, we've got to stop that. Next thing you know, they've got 5% food waste and the machine's 3 times too big. So you need to do your homework and understand. And it's not a substitute, so the Innovation Network is not a substitute saying everything will work everywhere. You're still going to have, you know, every hospital is different, every site is different, and you need to be able to pick the best solution for your site. And what we can do is narrow that down so you're not wandering around in a field of barley that's going crazy, because it can seem a bit like that.
So I think one of the really interesting developments will be if we manage to move care out of hospitals. Because I think that then blows FM wide open as well. Makes it way more interesting. For example, in Rugby, I know that they are looking at putting an actual ward in a shopping centre. Right? So there are some really different ways that we could structure our buildings and our facilities and our infrastructure to deliver healthcare. I think there's lots of discussion. I won't rehearse it all here around, you know, having the big hospital site that everybody drives to and all of that. I think if we can find ways, and they haven't sorted out the basics, which are how the money flows. But once we've solved that one, then we can get to a position where our healthcare is actually closer to where people want it. It means that we're doing things very, very differently. And I think that would be where we actually really get some real, genuine change, which will be quite revolutionary. Now, 2030 might be a push, but I live ever hopeful.
I did think that one.
From my perspective, I would like to say, and I think it is feasible, that in 5 years' time, there is, from my perspective, of course, a national health robotarium that does that triaging that you suggested there for robotics. A national entity whereby entrepreneurs, people within the NHS who've got ideas, can be bringing their ideas in for some kind of triaging, whatever that looks like. And we're building the systems whereby the adoption of robotics into the NHS is expedited, so the companies are not going out of business while they're trying to get their technology into the NHS. They're not going overseas and creating markets overseas. And NHS, the people in this room are supported within their roles. And some of the tasks that we talk about, the 3Ds, the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous, I'd like them to be started to be handed over to robotics.
So this is perhaps wishful thinking, but it is my belief, or I would say my hope, that in 5 years' time, we'll stop seeing problems as belonging to one department or the other. Well, I always struggle when I want to say this word. We'll start seeing problems as multidisciplinary as opposed to seeing problems as unidisciplinary, right? Because even clinical problems have environmental root causes, for instance, or social root causes. So we'll begin to recognize that problems cross multiple disciplines, and then we'll begin to talk to ourselves internally within different trusts, across trusts, as well as across the entire supply chain. Because when we do that, ultimately, it creates greater visibility for us to understand, just like you said earlier when we were having a conversation, where the person who's the waste manager at the end sees everything that comes to the waste point and is able to determine, for instance, and you gave me a very fantastic example where you said, when you call people in procurement to request for something, to requisition for something, they'll direct you to call the waste management first.
Yeah, furniture reuse program.
Exactly, yeah, right? And then when you call the waste manager, then it is only when the waste manager tells you, well, there's nothing in our portfolio, that then you can go out to buy fresh. So that's because they've begun to talk to themselves. Yeah. Currently, there's still a lot of silos, and like I said earlier, I'm a supply chain person, so I'm always looking at the extended nature of things, the extended supply. So which parties are we going to bring into the table to make this thing smoother? So ultimately, wishful thinking, but I want to believe that there will be greater collaboration, and then internally and externally. That would be where I'll go.
When you've got it all fixed, then what will it look like?
So, I mean, from my perspective, and we're already on that journey, and we've been there, over the last few years. But for me, it's about that professionalisation of our estates and facilities colleagues. We call them cleaners, but a cleaner isn't a person, it's a product that we use. Let's turn them into professional people. They're cleaning operatives. We have great chefs in the NHS, we know that. We've seen over 5 years of competition, the amazing stuff that they put out there. Now, yes, they might elevate it because it's a competition and part of a development programme, but essentially these chefs are serving up the same food that they are serving within their hospitals. But yet, chefs are still banded as band 2. Cleaning operatives, and it's not the same as cleaning an office, they're banded at band 2. Our porters, band 2s. At the end of the day, they are often not seen as important as the doctors and the nurses. But as Liam said earlier, we are the one group of people that can shut a hospital down. Without us, there's no safe water, there's no power, no light, nothing gets cleaned, infections will spread, and nobody gets fed. And that's the key point of what we're looking at. When I go on sites, I don't want to hear people saying, oh, I'm just a cleaner, or I'm just a cook. Actually, no, you're really important members of that clinical and hospital team. We may get called support services, and yes, we are there to support, but actually, what they are doing is highly trained work. Our cleaning operatives are out there dealing with infections. You know, we saw how important they were during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our chefs are dealing with allergens. They're dealing with, you know, different lifestyle diets and all sorts of things every single day. The competition challenges them for 5 days doing allergens, children's food, breakfast challenges, because that's what they do every day within your organisations. Now, you know, it would be lovely to recreate something like that for cleaning operatives, but we feel it might get a little bit challenging, really. Speed mopping or something like that, it's not quite, won't be seen in quite the same light. But actually, my challenge to all of you would be to go back to your trusts and make sure that everyone, from your chief exec down, knows the name of their cleaning operatives, knows who's cooking the food. Why does the board need special food if they're having a meeting? No, they should be eating the same as the patients. Because if it's fit for the patients, it's fit for the chief exec. So from my perspective, I'd like to see that in 5 years' time, our whole profession has gone up in everybody's estimation, and that people genuinely understand that hospitals can't run without us.
Absolutely.
I think I'm glad you came to me after Emma, actually, because I think as soft FM facilities, whatever you want to call us within your individual trusts, the onus in the next 5 years is actually on us as leaders in that realm to utilise the cleaning standards, the catering standards, use the clinical waste strategy to actually make sure that within the next 5 years, when we are looking at hospital out of the home, for example, that estates facilities aren't the add-on to that conversation, that we aren't the people that the board come to after the decision has been made, after the plan has been agreed, to ask, and how are you going to deliver that, and how is that going to be safe? That actually we've got the seat at the table early on in the conversation to drive those improvements and to drive that change that we all know is going to be needed to be able to deliver our care in the future, but actually that we've got as much of a voice at the table as our clinical colleagues. And, you know, sometimes that is going to take being brave and standing up in front of the chief operating officer and saying, well, actually, you know, the cleaning standards are in the NHS standard contract, so if you're not going to agree with me and you're not going to fund them, then I'm going to have a problem legally. And it won't always be popular, but actually that is the burden that we are going to have to take on in the next 5 years.
And I think this next phase could be very exciting. As we started talking about services being pushed out into the community, it will stretch us as the estates people, no doubt about it. But there are tools out there that will help us, and I spoke about the Internet of Things, which can help us do this. And I've a really weird view about how hospitals should be run, and it's not really, I don't think everybody takes it on as radically as I do. I think hospitals should be factories for making people better, and we should have hospitals where the flow of patients is much smoother than we've got at the moment. And I think some of the things that we're going to do when we start to push these services out is going to be really interesting. And the other thing, I don't know if anybody follows cricket. So I love cricket, and I've been watching cricket for 20 odd years, and the grounds are all empty. And they've been playing 4-day cricket at county cricket matches for as long as I can remember. The grounds are all empty. Why? Because we're all at work. And then somebody had a brilliant idea. Why don't we do cricket in the evening? And they started 20, 20 and 100, and the grounds are all full. So one of the things that I think as well is that when we push this stuff out into the community, we make the services available when people are not at work. So if you need to go and have a blood test, or you need to go and have something, you do it outside of working hours. How about that? And even if you said, well, what we're going to do is not just operate outside working hours, what we'll do is we'll have a double shift. And actually, we start eating really quickly into the backlog. So I think there's a real opportunity in the future, and to stop and look at these things. I sit with the new hospital programme, I listen to the guys that are doing, I say the things that I say, some of them sticks and some of it doesn't. But I think, you know, again, as estates people, we understand how the buildings work. Mm-hmm. We understand how the buildings prevent things from happening. And that's so important. And I'll finish on this bit. we came into our own during 2 events, COVID and when we had a collapse of one of the clinical waste companies. And at that point, every single CEO in the country knew that if they didn't take care of their waste, their hospital shut. And there were hospitals within 2 hours of shutting because they were up to their eyeballs in waste. And we managed, by hook or by crook, to keep all of that flowing. And that showed the importance of that part of the estates team, along with the cleaning guys and the porters and everybody else, keeping this all going. Fabulous thing. So don't ever let people forget that, because as we move away from COVID, that pain that everyone was going through will dim. But it's a brilliant example of what the estates team can do and as a team effort doing. You know, don't ever forget that.